Today I'm going to show you how to use native APIs to get your battery level in both iOS and Android. And we're doing that right now. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Alex. If you're new here, you should subscribe to the channel right now because we're doing lots of NativeScript stuff. Oh yeah. Get your NativeScript tips, tricks, and tutorials right here. Just hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of those. I got 2 for the price of 1 for you today. Well, actually, it's free, so I guess you're getting both of them for free. The first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to find some native code on the web and use that in your NativeScript apps. It's gonna be Java code, and you're gonna be able to translate that into JavaScript code. Very easy. The second thing we're going to do is get that battery status level updating. I'm going to show you that on Android and iOS. And while the Android emulator actually lets you update the battery level in the emulator, iOS emulator won't let you do that. So we'll write the code and then we'll be back out here to do the tests on real live devices. All right, check it out. I'm going to start out with the Hello World NativeScript application, as I usually do. And this is a TypeScript NativeScript app. I'm going to keep everything pretty much the same here. The main page XML, the main page code behind, and the view model. But what I do want to do is I want to display the battery status. So right over here in main page XML, let's clean this up a little bit here. Instead of this label that shows this message down here at the bottom, I'm going to bind this to battery level, which is a variable that I'm going to create shortly. Let's go back to the view model here. We don't have this message anymore, but I don't care. I'm going to leave that in. I'm going to create a public property called battery level, and I'm going to set that to 0. So if I were coming to this from the JavaScript world, which a lot of NativeScript developers are, I really wouldn't know how to get the battery level. And it's not one of the NativeScript built-in modules that comes with NativeScript. There's plugins out there that can do this for you. But what if I wanted to write native code? How would I go about doing this? Well, usually what I do is I start out with Google, and I'm going to Google for Android get battery level. You can see that I've already done this in the past. I'm just rehashing the steps so that you can see what I'm doing. And maybe I'll come across some code examples, including Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is valid and that counts. It's a perfectly good spot to get your information. Now this post is from 2011, 9 years ago. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in this post. There's a lot of answers that have been posted over the years. But really, not much has changed. So what I want to do is first, I want to show you how you can do this by finding some Java code, which is what we're seeing here. This is all Java code examples, and translating it into JavaScript code in NativeScript. So for example, here's an answer. Let's take this right here. Actually, I just saw a function that did this. Okay, so here is a function that says get battery percentage. I'm just going to copy this entire function right here from the answer. Let's go back to our code here, and inside the view model, I'm going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to paste that in. This is going to be what I'm going to translate. All right, so there's a few things here that you need to know. First of all, let's make this a private method in this class. We're not going to be passing in a context. I'm going to get the context from the application. So I'm going to delete this parameter here, and we want to return a number. All right, so the first thing we need is that parameter, which is the context. How do I get the Android context in a NativeScript app? Well, we have something called the application module that comes with NativeScript. So I'm going to go up here to the top and I'm going to import that. Import star as app module, and that's coming from TNS core modules application. Now that I have the app module, I can say app module.android, and this has the context on it. All right, so I can just save that off as a constant. There we go. Now I have context. So now this right here is a variable I don't have to worry about. The next line says intent filter iFilter. Now that we're getting into some Android specifics using the Android API, you can just code in JavaScript here. But if you are using TypeScript, there is one other helpful step that you can do, and that's to install the NativeScript platform declarations for Android. By the way, we're not just doing Android here. We're also going to do iOS at the end here, but I'm starting off with Android because I wanted to show you how easy it is to translate the Java code. All right, so platform declarations for NativeScript. I have a video, I'll link to it down below in the description, that takes you step by step on how to get that installed. So that's why I'm not gonna spend a ton of time doing that here. I'm just gonna do that real quick. I'm gonna add this TNS platform declarations dependency. Then I'm gonna do an npm install, so that gets installed. And then out here, I'm gonna say references.d.ts to add my references to the platform declarations. There we go, iOS and Android. And now that we are in NativeScript version 6.1.2, I believe, this skip lib check in the tsconfig file has already been added for you, and it's set to true. If you're using a slightly older version, you might not have skip lib check, so add that and set that to true. All right, now that we have the platform declarations, I can use that right here in my code. I can say Android and all the namespaces appear. So that's pretty handy. What we're looking for is this intent filter. How do you find out where in the Android namespace the intent filter is? Because it's not out here in the top level, so you have to go to one of these other sub namespaces to find it. Well, that's where Google comes in again. So I'm gonna go and open up a new tab and say Android intent filter. So we're looking for where this class is in the Android API. And here you can see that it's an Android content intent filter. That's the full namespace. So let's do that. Android.content dot, and look at that, there it is, intent filter. So that's the type that we're trying to instantiate here in this line. So I'm going to say const I filter, and that's of the type Android content intent filter, equals new android.content.intent filter, and we want to pass in this flag right here, intent.action battery changed. So again, we go to android.content.intent dot, and here's where all our flags are. We want action underscore battery changed. And as you can see, this line is perfectly valid JavaScript code or TypeScript code right here. And that replaces this line. So I'm going to delete this line and go to the next line. Here, I'm just going to do it in place. We have intent battery status. So I'm going to do const battery status, and that's of type android.content.intent. You don't really need to type it, but I like to be more explicit so I know exactly what the types are here. Next to the integer named level, I'm going to turn this into a const level of type number, and we have battery status. We're checking the battery status, and if it's not null, then we get the intent extra from the battery manager. Okay, so now we've come across battery manager, which also is not recognized by TypeScript, so we need to give it the full namespace. Again, I go to Google, or maybe I can just search the API documentation here in Android. So we need battery manager. Let's search for that, and there it is. Battery manager is under android.os battery manager. Cool, let's do that. Android.os.battery manager, and look at that. This lines up just fine, and it's now perfectly valid TypeScript code. Let's do the next line. Const scale, which is also a number. And again, we have the battery manager here. So android.os.battery manager. That line is done. Next line is a float, which is also a const, and that's a number in JavaScript. So we have level divided by scale. Now, this is casting scale to float, but we don't need to do that in JavaScript. So I'm just going to do the division. There we go. And now we'll return battery percentage times 100 cast to an integer, which I really don't need to do. So I'm just going to return battery percentage times 100. And this method is complete. Look at that. It's perfectly valid TypeScript code. We've now just translated that from Java to TypeScript. And now we can use that. So let's see, we have this battery level here set to 0. And let's say I have the onTap function. Instead of updating the message, I'm going to call this get battery percentage. So this dot get battery percentage, and I'm going to set this battery level to the result of that function. So this dot set. Why am I using this dot set instead of just setting the local variable? Well, I want the UI to be refreshed, and because we're using an observable here, it needs to trigger the notification to the UI. Check out my videos on observables in this channel to see why we need to do that. So this is called battery level. I'll copy and paste that so I don't make mistakes. And I'm going to pass in the battery percentage there. So here's my app running in the Android simulator. I'm going to hit tap here, and we get 100%. I have a little control here that I can change. Let's see if this works. I'm gonna change the charge level to, let's go 66% and hit tap. And look at that, we've read 66%. Now, unfortunately, in iOS, there's no way for the simulator to change the battery level or to even read the battery level. So we have to do this on a real device. So once we're done here, I'm going to deploy this on a real iOS device and also on an Android device. I'm going to go out and test this out for real. But let's also go ahead and write the code first to handle the iOS side. Now, we also want the Android side to automatically update without me hitting that button. How do you do that? Well, you're not going to just write a loop and get the battery percentage every time. There's a better way to do that. And I found a method using the same exact technique by Googling around, finding the Android code, and then translating it. So here's the other method that you're going to need in order to get the battery status and have it automatically updated. I'm going to create a private method here called Init battery status. This is a function that I want to call from the constructor, so it starts picking up those messages right away. So I'm gonna go to the constructor and say init battery status. Let's go down here and start implementing this. So first we want to check to see the platform that we're on, because this is going to handle both iOS and Android. I'm going to say if is Android, and that gets automatically imported for me right here. It's actually available in page, but this method is coming from the platform module. I can actually do that right here. I can change this to platform, and you can see that is Android is in there. So if is Android, I'm going to use the app module here and go down into Android, and then I'm going to call register broadcast receiver. What this will do is it'll set up a listener so that anytime the battery changes, it'll update us and it'll have this callback that we're going to set up. It's going to trigger this callback. So we want to say Android content intent. This is that filter that we've set up earlier, but now we're passing it right here. Action battery changed. And then we want to pass in the actual callback right here. Okay. So what are we going to do here? This callback is going to get triggered every time that the battery level changes. So we want to get that level. And we can get that from one of the parameters that get passed into this callback. The first parameter is called context. We're actually not going to use that. And the second parameter is called intent. And intent is of the type android.content.intent. We've seen this before. So we're going to use this intent right here, and we're going to call get int extra. Now we want to pass in the first parameter, which is the extra level, android.os.battery manager.extra scale. Extra level. Nope, not extra icon small, extra level. Okay. And then -1 for the second parameter here. So that's going to give us the level. You know what? Let me just close this out to give us more space here. I'm going to copy this and paste it over here. Now we need to get the scale. So constant scale is going to also talk to the battery manager, but instead of extra level, we're going to get extra scale. And finally, we're going to do the calculation here. Notice that this code is very similar to what we were doing before. So now we just need to get that calculation and set our battery level. So this dot set battery level, and we're going to pass in level that we got divided by scale. We're going to multiply that by 100. All right, so let's go back here, and this code should be running already in the background. It should be updated using HMR, and let me go ahead and do a modification here. I'm going to change this percentage. As you can see, if I'm sliding the charge level, it's actually updating us right on the fly. Now, I probably need to do a little bit of a math round here so I don't get these crazy numbers. Let's do math.round, and then we're going to pass in that result of that calculation there. All right, so now you can see that we're getting whole numbers up to 100%. Very cool. Now let's do the iOS side. So we're going to have an else statement here. That means we're not running on Android. For iOS, you can also Google for the exact way to do this. Now you're going to get Objective-C instead of Java, which is a little bit more difficult to translate. But luckily we have these NativeScript platform declarations which help us out. So we're going to get a UI device that we need to work with. And we need to first enable the battery monitoring. So we're going to get the current device, and there's a property called battery monitoring enabled. We set that to true. And then we need to get the initial level. So this dot set, I'm going to copy battery level here, and I'm going to pass in the current battery level. This is the initial one. And you can get that by using UI device, current device, and then it has the battery level on it. when you just need to multiply it by 100. And I'm also gonna go ahead and use math.round so we get nice round whole numbers here. After this initial set, we want to also set up a listener so that we get notified anytime the battery level changes. App module, iOS, this is coming from NativeScript, by the way. App module is our application module. Now we're going to the iOS side of things, and then we're gonna set the add notification observer, and we're gonna use the iOS API here, UI device battery level did change notification. It's a very long name. That's the one we wanna listen for. UI device battery level did change notification. Yep. And here we also get a callback. So very similar to the way we handled Android. It's just that this function name is different on iOS. Instead of register broadcast receiver, we have add notification observer. Instead of this intent filter, action battery change, now we have this UI device battery level did change notification constant in iOS. And as a result here, we get a notification as a parameter, but we're not going to be using that, so I'm just going to omit it. Now we just need to pull out the level, and we've already done this right here. So I'm going to use this math.round current device battery level. So let's pull that out. I'm going to save that as a new level, and I'm just going to use this right here. Set battery level to that, but we already calculated it. So I'm just going to pass in new level. Okay, this should do it. This should run on both iOS and Android and give us battery status updates. The only thing is I can't test this out on the iOS simulator. So I'm going to go ahead and now install this on the iOS device, and let's see how that works. Now, I did deploy this to iOS and Android devices. For iOS, I'm using this. I don't even know what this is. They don't say it on the back. I think it's an iPhone 5S. Anybody know what this is? All right, so I got this device here. And there is my app right there in the corner. I'm gonna go ahead and activate it. And you can see that it has 32% left. I'm gonna let it sit here for a bit. Let's check out the Android side. Here I have a Pixel 1, even though Google doesn't put the name of it either on the device. And there is my battery app. It's at 92% right now. So it looks like it's working. But I'm gonna sit here for a bit, maybe play some videos and see if I can get this to go down. Here's a good one. Animated action bar in NativeScript tutorial. That's one of mine. Custom animated top bar in your NativeScript app. I'm going to show you how to make a clone of the... That's a good song. This is a video where I show how to create animated action bar that mimics how the Twitter app works. Check that out. I'll link to it down below if you are interested. All right, so apparently watching about 2 minutes of that video made my battery go down to 91%. All right, so this is updating. Very cool. Let's see if in this time that I've been sitting here, if the iOS one updated. Yes, there it is, 31%. So there you go, folks. Both iOS and Android battery level updating happening on real devices, since we can't do this on a simulator. Hopefully this will help you out. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please consider doing so. You'll get tips, tricks, and tutorials about NativeScript. And I'll see you in the next video.